We're at 12:30, so I want to welcome you all to our 2023 Mindbridge Edge Conference, the Human Edge. It is my great pleasure and privilege to welcome and introduce our keynote speaker, Professor Avi Goldfarb. Avi is the Rotman Chair in Artificial Intelligence and Healthcare and Professor of Marketing at the Rotman School of Management, which is part of the University of Toronto. I read Avi's first book, Prediction Machines, many years ago, and I consider this book and his most recent one as something anyone anticipating building or leveraging AI should read. This year, I was honored to be asked to participate as a subject matter expert at the CFO Leadership Program at Rotman's, where I met Avi in person, and what ensued were some fascinating discussions. I really enjoyed it. So Avi is also the Chief Scientist at the Creative Destruction Lab, CDL, in Toronto, where he helps guide and mentor seedling science and tech companies. Avi is a true trailblazer in the field of AI and digital technology economics, and a remarkable portfolio of achievements. There's too many to mention, and they span across academia, research. He's really a global thought leader in this area. His insights into this disruptive economics of artificial intelligence promise to illuminate our path forward to an enlightened future. For those attending the session, please feel free to ask questions in the Q&A, and we'll try to get to these towards the end of the session. But without further ado, let's get started. Let's dive into the world of the power and prediction, the disruptive economics of artificial intelligence with Professor Avi Goldfarb. Over to you, Avi.
Thanks, Robin. Fantastic to be here and great to see you again. So as Robin mentioned, I'm a professor at the University of Toronto. Now I sit in the business school, and about a few decades ago, in our computer science department, they hired a man named Geoff Hinton. And as you may or may not know, Geoff Hinton invented one of the core technologies, perhaps the core technology, underlying the advances and excitement in AI over the past decade. And so Professor Hinton and his students and junior colleagues developed this technology, and the future heads of research at Facebook, at AI research at Facebook, at Apple, at OpenAI, 15 years ago, were all in Toronto working with Hinton. Now, that head of research at Facebook, along with Hinton and Yoshua Bengio in Montreal, went on to win the Turing Award, which is effectively the Nobel Prize for computer science. And there was great things happening in the computer science department about 2 blocks from where I sit in the business school. Now, I don't know how much you guys remember of how universities work, but normally the way this would impact my life is I would open an email from the university and it would say, there's great things happening in the computer science department. I read the article and say, oh, I feel really wonderful being at the University of Toronto, where there's fantastic stuff happening in the university in the comp sci department. And then I go back to my normal everyday work. But what's different, I don't just sit in the business school, but I run this organization, or help run this organization, called the Creative Destruction Lab, which is a program that helps science-based startups scale. And through the Creative Destruction Lab, we can see what's happening not just around the University of Toronto, but in science labs around the world. But our very first cohort way back in 2012, there was a company called Atomwise, run by a doctoral student out of Hinton's lab in our comp sci department, that said they were using artificial intelligence to discover new pharmaceuticals, AI for drug discovery. And put yourself back 11 years ago, that just seemed crazy. The idea that some crazy technology that sounded like science fiction, artificial intelligence, could help us cure disease seemed almost impossible. But we dug into the technology and it seemed like he was onto something. Then the next year, we had 2 more companies claiming to be AI companies, another one in pharmaceuticals and one in the insurance industry. And then by 2015, we had more AI startups come through our lab than at that time any other incubator or accelerator or program anywhere in the world. And so my co-authors and I, Jay Joshua and I, we built our careers understanding how the internet affected the economy and research and business. And we realized between 2012 and 2015 that AI was something to try to get our heads around. This was the new thing that we, because we had this front row seat in Toronto and through the Creative Destruction Lab, had a leg up on everybody else. And so that led to two books. Our first book, Prediction Machines, came out in 2018, and more recently, Power and Prediction came out in 2022, that are the combination of the insights that we've gained from mentoring now and advising and observing hundreds of AI startups with our economics framework of, with our research hats on, of understanding how technological change affects markets. This is quite a moment for AI. We started thinking about it in 2012. We started working on it somewhere in 2014, 2015. Our book came out a couple of years later. But since November 2022, and accelerating in the more recent months, there has just been this explosion of excitement in what this technology can do. Maybe it's going to be a $23 trillion industry. Maybe you think it's only $2 trillion. Whatever, it's a lot. There's a sudden leap forward into usefulness that people in their everyday lives can see how AI might affect the way we live and the way we work. At the same time, however, if we read the press, there's all this confusion about what we're talking about when we're talking about artificial intelligence. The press seems to think we're on the verge of machines that can do everything we can do. Maybe they listen to us like the Jetsons or the droids from Star Wars, or maybe they don't listen to us and we're going to have machines taking over the world like they did in The Matrix or The Terminator or in all other, in much of the rest of science fiction. Now, I don't think this idea of a truly artificial general intelligence is crazy. Frankly, I used to, but over the past few years, I've been convinced that there's reasons to think this might happen someday. But this day is not today. The technology we're talking about today is a very particular form of what computer scientists call artificial intelligence. And in fact, it's a branch of computational statistics. Today's AI is prediction technology in the statistical sense. We're using information you have to generate information you don't have. Now, as you'll see, better, faster, and cheaper prediction is nevertheless transformative. But when you hear AI today, think prediction. Now, we're economists. We think about the world in demand curves and supply curves and costs and revenue. And think about prediction technology. What's happened since 2018 or so when our book came out is that the cost of prediction has fallen dramatically. And Econ 101 tells us when the cost of something falls, we do more of it. Demand curves slope downward. If something is cheap, people buy more of it. Price falls, quantity goes up. And so, what does that mean in practice? It means that we're starting to see machine prediction in more and more and more applications. The first application of machine prediction in business were good old-fashioned prediction problems. Like maybe the most old-fashioned prediction problem in business is you walk into a bank and you want a loan. And the loan officer there has to predict whether you're going to pay them back. In the old days, they'd look you up and down and go with some gut feel, maybe a little collateral on whether you're going to pay back their loan. And increasingly, they're relying on machine learning. They're relying on prediction machines to predict whether you're going to pay back their loan. The insurance industry is another industry that has embraced artificial intelligence. Today's AI, prediction machines. Why? Because they're in the business of prediction. What insurance does, their fundamental product involves pricing risk. And increasingly, they're using machine learning tools. They're using AI to help them predict whether you're going to make a claim and how much that claim is going to be. But what started to happen as predictions gotten cheaper is we've realized that many things that we didn't used to think of as prediction can be reframed as prediction problems in an engineering sense. So think about medical diagnosis. What does your doctor do when they diagnose you? They take in data about your symptoms and they fill in the missing information of the cause of those symptoms. That's prediction. And increasingly, we're using machine learning tools, we're using AI to generate diagnoses to predict what's causing your symptoms. Image recognition. How does Google know there are so many cats on YouTube? Well, it takes in data about the pixels in an image, and through those pixels, it identifies certain shapes that, based on the data it has, predict that that's a cat. Simple as that. It's a reframing of what used to be thought of as a human-only problem into something that can be engineering-wise solved with prediction. Generative AI is also prediction technology. You ask ChatGPT a question, and it predicts the set of words that is the best response to that question. Right? It's predicting the distribution of words, the best set of words for your query. Or similarly, you ask ChatGPT or you ask DALL-E, another OpenAI product, for an image of an astronaut on a horse in the style of Andy Warhol, and it will give you an image like this. This is an image of an astronaut on a horse in the style of Andy Warhol. This is not a search engine. It's not that there was an image in its database and it showed that to you. Instead, it's doing statistical prediction. It took in data about what astronauts look like, what people on horses look like, and what the style of Andy Warhol looks like. And it combines those to create a new, unique image based on the combination of that data to predict what you're looking for when you ask for an astronaut on a horse in the style of Andy Warhol. So point number one, today's AI, when you hear artificial intelligence in 2023, we are not in a world of the Matrix or the Terminator or even Rosie from the Jetsons. We are in a world of prediction machines. That is the process of filling in missing information. But as predictions getting cheaper, we're starting to get this sense that it is a general purpose transformative technology. Andrew Ng said AI is a new electricity, and that has been picked up over and over again by leading thinkers around the world. Electricity, it transformed the way we live and the way we work. Our lives in the 21st century look very little like people's lives at the beginning of the 19th century before electricity found its way into our homes and our workplaces. So there's this sense that AI is the new electricity. And what does that mean for a technology to transform the way something works? Well, imagine that you're turning up a dial and your predictions today are fine, but over time, they'll get better and better to a point where you can do something different. What about Amazon's predictions? Amazon is an amazing machine learning company. They have a recommendation engine. They make predictions about what you might want to buy, and they're right something like 1 out of every 20. Now think about that. They have hundreds of millions of items in their catalog, perhaps more. And they're right, they predict what you're looking for something like 1 out of every 20 times. That's an amazing feat of technology. And in Amazon's case, it is a very profitable feat of technology. But it hasn't fundamentally changed the way Amazon's retail store operates. Amazon remains a catalog company, just like they were, say, 20 years ago. You go onto Amazon, if you went onto Amazon 20 years ago, the process would have been very similar. They make a recommendation to you. Now, unlike today, where the recommendation is personalized based on machine learning, in 2003, every one of you would have been recommended the Da Vinci Code. The Da Vinci Code at the time was their most popular product. And so everybody got the same recommendation. No AI necessary. You get a recommendation. You choose to go with their recommendation or look in their catalog. You order what you want. They send that information to their warehouse and they ship it to your door. You shop, listening to the recommendation or not, then they ship it to you. Now, imagine we turn up that dial. Imagine their AI gets better and better and better. So instead of being 5% accurate, it's 10 or 20 or 50 or 70% accurate. At some point, they're going to be good enough, their predictions are going to be good enough that they're not going to have to wait for you to order. Instead of you shopping and then them shipping, if their predictions are good enough, they'll just ship it right to you. And then you can open a box at your door and buy what you want. And they'll be grabbing enough share of your wallet that it's worth it for them to build a whole infrastructure for returns for the 10, 20, 30, or even 50% of stuff that you don't want. Now, let's be clear. Amazon does not do this. And I don't know if they ever will. But I do know they've thought about it. Here was a patent based on this fundamental idea of shipping before you shop, anticipatory package shipping from Amazon. This has been on their radar. But then if you look a little closer, something's not quite right. This patent was from a decade ago, and they're still not doing shipping then shopping. They're still fundamentally in the same catalog company model, a really good one and an extraordinarily profitable one, but the same catalog company model that they were in 20 years ago. Now, Amazon has generated a return from its AI, but lots of companies haven't. So many, until very recently, so many managers who had invested in AI were reporting minimal, if any, financial benefits from these investments. How can we reconcile that with the idea that AI is the new electricity? If it's going to transform the way we live and the way we work, how come so many people, so many firms, until very recently, weren't seeing the benefit? Well, let's dig into electricity a little bit more. Edison's patent for the electric light bulb was in 1880. Tesla's patent for the electric motor, 1890. If you were paying attention in the 1880s, it was clear that electricity would transform the way we lived and worked. But it wasn't until the 1920s, 40 years later, that half of US households and half of US factories had electrified. It took a whole generation or more to move from, we see this technology as extraordinary, till it impacted most people at home or at work. How is that possible? How could a technology which, from the point of view of 2023, was so obviously transformative, how could it have taken so much time to hit most houses and most factories? Well, let's talk a little bit about the factories. This is what a factory might have looked like in the 1880s. If you look at this image, you'll see in the back, there's a steam engine, a power source. And that power source runs all the machines in the factory. Every single machine in this factory is connected by a belt to that central power source. Now, if you remember your high school physics, you'll remember that energy dissipates with distance. And so you want to put the most power-hungry machines as close as possible to that power source. The geography of the factory, the logic of production, was determined by the power needs of the machines. And so you had your power-hungry machines as close as possible to that steam engine. And you moved the product as it was being built back and forth, not based on making the movement of the product as efficient as possible, but in order to lower costs. Now, what happened in the 1890s is a handful of factory managers realized that they could save 5, 10, or even 15% of their energy costs if they moved from steam to electricity. And so they took out the steam engine and they dropped in an electric motor at the exact same point. and kept the workflow the same. And in the process, they saved 5, 10, 15% in energy costs. But to make that happen, they had to figure out, how do we get wires into the factory? How do we get electricity into the factory? How do we distribute it? How do we actually take out that steam engine, drop in the electric motor? How do we wire up the factory so that it's fire safe? How do we teach people how to be responsible and safe with electric machines? All of those other processes were extremely expensive relative to the 5, 10, 15% they saved in energy costs in order to do what they always did, but a little bit better. And so by 1900, very, very few had adopted. These point solutions for greater energy efficiency only made sense for those companies that had extraordinary energy costs. But once people realized that electricity allowed them to place the machines wherever they wanted, we ended up with an entirely new kind of system. So around 1900, Henry Ford and others realized that electricity, it wasn't just cheap power. Electricity was distributed power. It allowed you to decouple that power source from the machines. And once you could decouple the power source from the machines, you could do things differently. It wasn't doing the same thing you always did, but a little bit better. It was recognizing a new production process, the quintessential 20th century factory that you might imagine, with the inputs coming in one end and outputs coming out the other, with modular production all the way through on a huge factory floor, perhaps in a suburban or rural area. That's a direct consequence of the decoupling of the machines from the power source that arose because of electricity. Now, today, we're just coming out of the 1890s. We can see the potential of this technology, but we're only now starting to identify where the real payoffs are. We're only now starting to see where the benefits are on the other side, so that we can build the organization that can use AI profitably. So many of the AIs we see today are point solutions with no vision forward of how those point solutions will eventually enable a new kind of system. And the biggest potential is in those new kinds of systems. And so if all you're doing is trying to do what you always did, but only a little bit better, without a step function change in what you're trying to accomplish, you won't see transformation through AI. Now, how does this all work in practice? Well, AI is prediction technology. Just think of it, AI. Today's AI is driven by advances in machine learning. Machine learning is a branch of computational statistics, and computational statistics is all about prediction machines. And prediction is valuable because it is an input into decision-making. And it's decision-making that's everywhere. A prediction in and of itself has no use unless it's going to support some particular decision. Importantly, prediction is not decision-making. And so as AI gets better and better and better at prediction, as prediction gets cheaper, the question is, what becomes more valuable? And what that is going to be, the complements to prediction, are going to be the other aspects of decision-making. Field of research called decision theory. And decision theory unpacks the various aspects of decision-making in order to help individuals and businesses make better decisions. The key aspects of a decision in decision theory are the prediction. They're the action. What are you actually going to do with that prediction in order to generate an outcome? different kinds of data, of information that help generate that prediction, and this thing we call judgment. Judgment at a high level is knowing which predictions to make and what to do with those predictions once you have them. And what prediction machines do is they give you a value, but a human still needs to decide what to do, what decision to make, what action to take as a consequence of that prediction. My favorite example of this comes from science fiction, right? What we're doing is we're taking what currently happens in our head, a human prediction combined with human judgment, and we are decoupling the prediction. The AI is now providing the prediction from the human judgment. So just like with electricity, we decoupled the machines from the power source, and that led to disruptive opportunity. Here, we are decoupling the prediction from the judgment, again, leading to disruptive opportunity. To understand judgment, we go back to science fiction a little bit. I don't know if you've seen the movie I, Robot. It is it's a fine movie, but it's excellent science fiction. Here's what makes it excellent science fiction. So Will Smith plays Detective Spooner, and he's the protagonist. And he hates robots, and the movie's called I, Robot, so you can kind of see where the movie's gonna go. And there's this fascinating flashback scene that describes why he hates robots. So he and a little girl get into a car accident, and their cars both start sinking into a river. And it's pretty clear that both Will Smith and this little girl are about to drown. And then a robot comes along and saves him and not the girl. And that's why he hates robots. Now, it was a machine, so he could audit it. He could figure out, well, why did the machine save me and not the girl? And it turned out the machine predicted that the adult man, him, had a 45% chance of survival. And the girl only had an 11% chance of survival. And that's why the robot saved him and not the girl. Now, he goes on to say, but 11% was more than enough. And the human being would have known that. Well, maybe not. But either way, it's a statement about judgment. It's a statement about the value of one life versus another. That remains, even in a world of prediction machines, inherently human. In the science fiction world, someone programmed the robot to say a life is a life. But more generally, whenever we're using prediction machines, the AIs, the predictions, give us the numbers, the relative likelihood of different things happening. But we still need a human. We still need human judgment to decide what matters, what we value. Do we humans agree that that girl's life was worth more than 4 times an adult man's life? Maybe we do, maybe not. Nevertheless, in terms of thinking that through, that's judgment. Now, note, that's uncomfortable. Part of the disruption here, part of what makes this so hard, is that we don't love assigning values to such things. It is convenient that the prediction and the judgment are bundled together in our heads, and we don't have to confront what we think the relative value of one thing versus another might be. Now, that science fiction is starting to play out in the real world, in the sense that we are hearing and reading headlines claiming that AI is starting to pick who we're hiring and who we're firing. There was a story that wasn't quite true that claimed that Amazon was automatically tracking and firing their warehouse workers. So the story, which was largely fiction, but let's take the fiction as truth, that if you're a worker in an Amazon warehouse, at the end of every day, you get a number, okay? Your score for the day. And if your score fell below some threshold, you would be sent an email that said, don't bother to come back to work tomorrow. Now, that is a long way away from the way things operate. But imagine a workplace where that happened. Imagine a workplace where the workers were scored over the course of a day, or the course of a week or a month, And if their score fell below some threshold, they got fired. That sounds like an awful world. It sounds like quite dystopian. But it's important to recognize that is not a world of machine decisions. The AI is not picking who gets laid off. Instead, what that story is about is people at headquarters deciding they don't trust their warehouse managers. People at headquarters saying, you know what? Rather than trusting our warehouse managers to decide on the local HR decisions, we think we can create a score that determines whether these workers are good. And we can decide on the threshold using our judgment, our small team at headquarters, on what makes a good worker and whether somebody should be laid off. What AI does in this case is move the decision-making from a decentralized model where warehouse managers decide on HR decisions to a centralized model where a smaller team at headquarters gets to decide for the whole company. AI is not deciding, but it's changing the individuals who do decide. Through that decoupling, because the AI is making a prediction, you no longer need the person on the ground in that particular warehouse to make the overall decision. The AI is going to make a prediction, and now we can pre-specify the judgment about what makes a good worker. So AI is disruptive here, not because it makes the decision, but because it changes which humans, which people have power. So AI is useful for decision-making because it decouples the prediction from the rest of the decision. Now, there's a big question, which is, should you worry? Is this something that's going to come for your organization, your industry? How do we think about disruption in the context of any individual worker, function in the organization, firm, or industry? Well, start with your mission. Think about what you're actually trying to accomplish. What are your goals? And then think through how much of your standard operating procedures are about fulfilling those goals. This is a picture of one of the world's best airports. And what the world's best airports have in common, whether it's Seoul Incheon or Beijing or Singapore, is fantastic natural light, great restaurants, wonderful shopping, and all sorts of services, greenery, museums, a theater, a waterfall, public art. They are spectacular multi-billion-dollar pieces of architecture. That's what the world's best airports have in common. Now, this is the airport that all of you want to fly through. None of you want to fly. Given a choice, I imagine none of you would prefer this multi-billion-dollar structure to this tiny little shed. This airport is the private terminal at Boston Logan. If you fly private, if you have your own plane, if you have enough money to fly your own, to have your own plane and your own pilot, you fly through this terminal, at least to Boston. You'll notice it's poorly lit. It's got a couple of seats. There's some magazines there in the back, but if you look carefully, it's the same magazine over and over and over again. So how does that make sense? How do the super rich fly through a dump like this? And the rest of us, we get to fly through these beautiful multi-billion-dollar structures. Well, I'm going to think through the purpose of an airport. The mission of Seoul Incheon, one of those best airports in the world, is to ensure smooth air transportation. But if you think about what those billions of dollars are doing, it's mostly for the fact that they fail to ensure smooth air transportation. Smooth air transportation means you arrive at the airport, you walk up to the gate, you get on the plane, and it takes off. That's how it works if you have a private jet. For the rest of us, we don't know how long it's going to take to get to the airport. Then we don't know how long it's going to take to get through security. Don't really know how long it's going to take to get to the gate. There's some uncertainty about whether the plane's going to take off and when. And so we leave a whole bunch of slack in the process, and we end up having to spend hours at the airport. That's terrible. The ultimate in customer service is you walk to the airport, you get on a plane, and it takes off. And so when we think about so much of that architecture, so much of those standard operating procedures dedicated to failing to serve the mission, that's an industry, notwithstanding some regulatory issues, of course, that we should think of as ripe for disruption, because their business model is predicated on the fact that they fail to really deliver what they should. Now, there's other industries like this too. So imagine you go to your doctor, and your doctor looks at your blood work, your symptoms, and family history, and says in a very serious voice, "I'm sorry, but there's a 5% chance something catastrophic is going to happen to your health over the next year. But don't worry, we're going to give you peace of mind against that potential catastrophe by writing you a check if it happens. If something catastrophic happens to your health, we'll give you $500,000 and you'll be, that will make you whole." You'd be like, no, that's not how it's supposed to work. You're supposed to give me a treatment plan. You're supposed to explain how I can reduce the risk that something bad happens to me. Well, luckily, that's not how medicine works. But that is exactly how your home insurance works, right? Your home insurance, your insurance company has all sorts of wonderful data about your house. Over the past few years, it's been possible for the insurance industry to have data about your roof from satellites and your yard. They can have data about the kind of pipes you have coming into your house through home inspections, your electrical wiring, all sorts of other things, what's going on with your neighbors, all sorts of things about your house that you may not even know are risks. And with that information, they price your risk and they say, you know what? Your house insurance is expensive. Here's the price. But don't worry, if something catastrophic happens to your house, we'll write you a check. And in the process, we will give you peace of mind against catastrophe to the most valuable asset you own. And we just accept that. But that's not peace of mind. Peace of mind would be something totally different. It would be something like what your doctor does, which is to say, you know what, the reason your insurance is expensive is because there's a real risk of water non-weather damage, that your pipes are going to leak. But here's a $50 sensor that will reduce the risk of those pipes, and in the process, actuarially save you $100 a year. Those predictions are already there, that we can predict the sub-para level of what might be wrong with a house. The tool for leaky pipes is already there. For something like $50, we can put in a sensor that detects leaky pipes and then shuts off your water before catastrophe strikes. But we don't do that. That's not how the insurance industry operates. And so my co-author and I, we worked with a large insurance company to try to make this happen. And we worked with underwriting, and we figured out they were pretty good at predicting the sub-para level. And with a little bit of work, they could get it better. They could get a good sense of whose pipes were likely to leak. Then we worked with various vendors and found one sensor that helps identify leaky pipes and another sensor that helps identify an electrical fire. Those tools were already there. Then we got to the hard part. If we're changing the insurance company from a risk pricing business to a risk reduction business, we need to convince customers to change their behavior. And behavior change isn't just hard. That's not what actuaries do. The underwriting part of the insurance company, the center of power in that company, wasn't that interested in behavior change. They didn't have the expertise. The part of the company that did have the expertise was marketing. But a few things were wrong. First, the marketing part of this organization wasn't the strongest part of the organization. They hadn't had much need for behavior change, and so they didn't hire the best marketing people. And so the first step was to get great marketing people in place. CEO moved to that, and they did that. But then underwriting, they were the center of power. They controlled the data they didn't want to share. And so it was another exercise to get underwriting to cooperate in order to share data and share their predictions with the new marketing team. And then even once marketing and underwriting started to get along and work together to build these predictions and do behavior change, marketing itself had its own problems. The marketing function in this particular company wasn't called marketing. It was called marketing and sales. And the sales function, the salespeople were compensated by commission. And so the last thing they wanted was to give customers a discount just because it reduced costs massively for the company as a whole. And so they had to start thinking about pricing things differently and compensating their sales force differently. All of that made it a real challenge to take advantage of what this technology could truly do. They already got value from AI in underwriting. And then in order to move to those next steps of transformative change in risk reduction, that required cooperation across the company. So this key point number 4 is that you're looking for places where your organization fails to serve its mission in order to identify how you can turn your current point solutions into transformative change that everybody in the company notices. Step 1 is to identify a use case where AI can create value, even under your existing system. And then step 2 is to look for transformation. What does this new AI, what does this prediction machine allow you to do differently in order to generate a new kind of value? That's the theme of our book, Power and Prediction. And I'm looking forward to hearing your questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Avi. That was great, really great. So we have a couple of questions. I'd like to start with one that I've wanted to ask you actually for a while. When we were at Rothmans, we were in the CFO leadership session. We were talking to business professionals about this exact topic about looking for those early quick wins in AI, but then this transformational aspect. Where's this opportunity for transformation? That next step, right? And what I found interesting was a lot of the participants were struggling to think of those transformational changes, right? Because it's a hard problem. And I wanted to ask you, what do you think makes that hard? And what are the patterns that you have seen where people have successfully crossed over from, okay, we have a quick win, now what's the transformational effect?
That's a great question. So there's 2 core things to be thinking about, which are impact and feasibility. Okay. Feasibility is, let's think about places where machine prediction can help us do things that we already do, but do it better. Okay, where we have the data or can access the data. We know how this is going to work in terms of who does what. Let's move to that next step. Then we got to think about impact. And impact has 2 stages. And this is where things get tricky. Because the first stage is, if we do this thing and implement it in our existing workflow, is it going to make a difference? Is it going to help us deliver better service, save some costs, do what we always did, but enough better that it's worth this investment in data and time and human resources. Okay. Most people can get their heads around that part. Then the hard part. The hard part is, okay, now that we have that running, 2 years from now, once this is going great, what can we do differently that will allow us to deliver a different kind of value? What's the new product that comes out of that? What's the new service? What do we do now that we only do okay, or we kind of fudge our way through, that we could really do better once we have this up and running? And there's different ways to go through that thought exercise. So, and we depending on the group, and we brainstorm through a few of them. So version number 1 is, imagine your whole team goes on vacation. Okay, it takes a sabbatical for a year. You're the only one left. Okay. You want to automate as much as possible. What are the decisions you still need to make? Okay. By focusing on those decisions you still need to make, you'll understand what the big picture is of what you do and what your team does. And then in the process, you'll be able to identify new ways to deliver value. So that's a thought experiment that goes to it. Another version of it is start with that. What is the mission of the organization, or my part of the organization? What is the ultimate in service? Let's think through. Just imagine we delivered on our mission perfectly on a customer by customer basis. Okay. Then compare that to what you do today and figure out if there's somewhere in that mismatch where the key reason for the mismatch is bad prediction. And that's another way. That's the second way to do it. And then the third way we do it is many companies have different tiers of customer service. Okay, so your very, very best customers get excellent service, like financial services. This is certainly true. And then the next tier of customers get good service, and then most customers get fine service. Then what you do is reimagine what everybody could get as if they were at the top of the distribution. So, this is that airport example came exactly from this thought experiment. Okay, how do the super rich fly? How do they travel? Why don't the rest of us travel like that? It's weird. The rest of us get all this stuff that the super rich don't have. Maybe all that stuff isn't so important. And so there is this, what happens for the very best, and how can we make that serve everybody as a third way to run that thought experiment.
Awesome. That's great. I think that comment about rethinking or reframing how you think about adopting AI, which we discussed in person. It was something which I really felt that from our customers. The ones who were, really successful with the ROI, they were doing that transformational phase. So it very much resonated for me. So we're actually really close to being, someone's going to pull out a hook and pull me off, and we're going to have to go to the next session. I have one more question that actually came from our audience. And this is asking you to make a prediction, right? Maybe. What are you excited about, and what is coming next in the world of AI?
Okay. I am really excited about the potential for AI as an equalizer. So a version of that story I just told you, where the rest of us get the service that the elite get, but on both sides of the equation. So I have a paper that came out in Science over the summer, where we talk about the potential for AI to lead to what we call a Turing transformation, which is that the productivity that currently is experienced by people who have extraordinary education and are super skilled, some of that productivity is going to be available to everybody. So doctors do diagnosis, they get paid very well for it. If machines are doing diagnosis, that superpowers nurses and pharmacists and all the other medical professionals. And that's going to be amazing. So what I think is coming next for AI is this democratization of these tools so that more and more and more people can benefit from the level of service and the the level of productivity that right now only the people at the top get.
Very cool. So I want to thank you so much, Avi, for coming and presenting to us. It was a great session. I'm very much looking forward to the sessions that we have coming, but thanks so much for attending, and thanks all those who attended the session online as well. Have a great day.
Okay, thanks. Take care.
Thanks.